What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and today I'm being joined by Tony Farina. Now, he's told us about his comics, but today we're doing a different thing. We're going to be deeping into short stories, literary fiction. That's right, we are those book bods that everybody loves. We're going to be talking about some short stories. So I'm going to think of a name for these episodes. We've got Desert Island Comics. I'll think of something for this as well. But Tony, how you doing? You all right, mate?
I'm great. I'm very excited. I love me some short fiction. It's one of the few things that Americans have done well. And so I'm proud of us. Not proud of us for most things, but short fiction, we are top of the pops. So I'm really excited to do this.
Yeah, well, especially in sort of, well, in many ways, but from my point of view, like, you know, the horror, weird fiction, sci-fi sort of realm. Yeah, you guys, you know, the Americans provide some top-notch short story fiction. So, and what are we talking about today for the ladies and gentlemen?
Well, when you said short stories, 20, and of course you're the 20th Century Geek,
yeah.
I said, well, the greatest, and I think this is period, and it's hyperbole, I'm sure, but the greatest American short story of all time is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. And so that's what we're going to talk about. That's my opinion. Of course, people will come at me and they'll be like, wait, you've read, you know, The Pit and the Pendulum, right? I'm like, I have. And you've read, you know, anything by Poe. Like, I have. I've read them all. I've read Young Goodman Brown by Hawthorne. I've read it all. But Shirley Jackson is the most economical writer.
Yes.
Like, if you want to teach short fiction and you don't include Shirley Jackson, you're missing out, because there's very few people who can pack such a punch. Even her novels are short. We Always Lived in the Castle, short. She does not mess around, but she's also not cheap with her words either. So there's something about her skill set and how her brain works. I don't understand her genius. So when you said short story, I'm like, my favorite short story ever of all time is The Lottery. So I'm here. I'm so excited.
No, it's a great story. I had only ever read this once before, and that was when I was at school, and I remember it shocking me then, and it had been years. So I went back to read this. Just there's going to be a link in the show notes below. So I'm going to tell you right now, because it's a very, very short story. It will take you less than half an hour to read. This was originally published in the New Yorker in 1948. And it's still available on the New Yorker website. There is a link below if you want to read this. And actually, you don't have to read it, because not only that, the New Yorker provides an audio track for the story.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
I listened to it and I read it. So go check that out before we read, because we're going to spoil the crap out of this, right? So just let you know.
You have to. You can't do this and not spoil it. So
so,
if you haven't read this, stop. Really, truly, it'll just take you a few minutes. It's such a quick read.
It'll take you 20 minutes. Go read the story or go listen to the part. The link is below in the show notes, right? Go listen. Right. Have you done it?
They're back. I feel like they're back now.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm giving you one final warning. Right, we're going into it. Right. So the lottery. I'm going to let you explain it first, and then we're going to get into it, because I've got many thoughts about this story.
It's so brilliant. So to me, the smartest thing she does is call it The Lottery, because the lottery always has a positive connotation.
Yes.
Always. So it's like, in our country, the lottery is, it's just what you think it is. People pay money, you get tickets, you get numbers, and then you win money. And you guys have a lottery, of a national lottery, and different countries have their own national lotteries, and different towns have their own lotteries. So lottery is always good. You think. The idea being somebody's going to win something special that no one else gets that year or that month. And here we do like weekly lotteries, and nobody wins for a long time. And then we'll get to the point in this country where they'll be like, not that long ago, somebody won like $1 billion. Because it had been like almost 6 months since anybody won. So it's a big, lottery has this positive connotation. So the idea behind this story is this little town It's June 27th, which I think was the day we were supposed to record. And
It
we
was.
couldn't.
Yeah.
That would have been amazing. I didn't pick that, but I wish I had intentionally. Maybe I unintentionally did that. So it's June 27th. It doesn't say a year, which is also genius. This little tiny town with 300 people, they're gathered to do a lottery. And it's one of those things where they just say, well, if you don't do it, everything goes sideways. And I hear there's some other towns that have done away with their lottery and blah, blah, blah. So I don't want to totally spoil it right now, but so what happens is the towns gather. It's very patriarchal society where it's like, oh, so-and-so man isn't here. You got to have a son do it. Well, he's only 16. And so this whole thing, so she sets you up to deceive you constantly. So that's it. So this town does this yearly lottery, and it's like some weird, good luck tradition. And if they don't do the lottery bad things will happen.
Yeah, it's more than that, because at one point, so there's two things I just want to sort of interject with. Firstly, you said about the families gathering. It's this scene of you could expect like a family picnic or a village picnic or whatever it is. It's filled with these sort of like the kind of things you'd expect: kids running between people's legs, families chattering inanely. Some of the dialogue is some of the dialogue doesn't go anywhere because it is literally just two families going, "Hey, have you heard about so and so broke his leg? Oh, that's ridiculous!" And all this. It's village chatter. In the midst of that, though, are these little snippets of things that seem odd, but you're sort of like, oh, all right, well, maybe that's her village experience. The kids are playing and they are collecting, and we'll get to it. They're collecting piles of rocks and they are giving them to the babies and all this other stuff. And at one point, there's even acknowledgement like, well, they can't do anything with them, but you've got to get them involved.
Yeah.
Roll on, and you're like, hey, what? And then again, there's this, but the notion of this whole lottery. There's a poem, and I can't, or a limerick, sort of like lottery in June, good harvest soon, kind of thing. Like this all goes back to this idea of good harvest and sort of thing. So it's all very sort of like folky and very sort of like you go, oh, right, very cool. It's setting you up to it starts with called the lottery. It's a positive connotation, and then the whole start of the book, the story, is just very quaint.
Oh, absolutely. It is. It's like, oh, they're waiting, and that they're waiting around, and there's this like weird, and again, Shirley Jackson's economy of words. Well, this box is even the oldest man in town, and this is his 75th lottery. Yeah. This box is older than him, and so you're like, oh, this has been around. And the rumor was they built this box of the remnants of the old box, and every year they say we ought to build a new box, and somebody's like, I can't believe it's another lottery. It seems like it was just last week, and so there's like this whole sense of tradition, and everybody's there, and you don't get, and like you said. It's why are we standing around? And then Mrs. Hutchinson shows up. She's like, sorry. They're like, you didn't think thought we were gonna have to go without you. She's like, well, you didn't want me to leave my dishes to be wet. And they're like, everybody like chuckle, laugh. Of course not.
Yeah, it's like Little House on the Prairie. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah. It just seems like it's like, oh, Mrs. Hutchinson's here. We're good. Now we can go. We were all gonna wait for her, but we need to hurry up and get it done for lunch. And so it's just this, it's totally, you have no idea what's happening. And and I want to say this here, I want to interject this here. So for years and years ago, before I was married to my first wife and had my kids, and long before I met my wife now and moved to Florida and everything, I lived in this little shit town called Manchester, Michigan. No offense, Manchester. Sorry, Chris. But it was just every year, and I'm a vegetarian, every year, every summer, they did a thing called the Manchester Chicken Broil. And right in the center of town, there was like a gazebo, and they would have like a brass band and everything. So even if I weren't a vegetarian, I lived there for like 2.5 years. It was just like renting there. Because I was working between Ann Arbor and Jackson, and Manchester was right in the middle. So it's like a perfect place for me to live geographically. But the first time I drove by the chicken broil, they're like, chicken broil. I'm like, oh, gross. I don't want the whole town to smell like chicken. But I drove by and watched them set up. And I was like, to myself, I said, oh, fuck, it's the lottery. And so every year for the because I was there for like 2.5 years, but it was like, 3 summers, the way that the math worked out. I never was in town on the chicken broil weekend. I got the fuck out. And it is this weekend right now. So in addition to it being near the 22nd, it was near the 4th of July. So it was on the right weekend. In this little weird town, they literally had a brass band. You couldn't get more idyllic than that. So I don't know if Manchester does the lottery. I just assume they do.
It's one of those things, isn't it? The beginning of this book, and I say before we spoil it and really get into the bits. The thing is, reading the start of this book, you've got an experience. I've got an experience. Like, I've lived in places where, in Britain as well, and I'm sure
Don't
the same
you
in the
live in a
States.
park? Aren't you like in the center of the place where the lottery could be?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I live amongst a bunch of fields. I live in a very small village. But yeah, over here we have things like cheese rolling, where they get a big drum of cheese and roll it down a hill every summer. We have these, then they'll have other things where other villagers will do this thing of traditions just build up, don't they? And so reading the start of this book, and it's the same as Punxsutawney Phil, the sort of seeing the groundhog.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's a tradition. It's so reading the start of this book, the start of the story, everyone can relate to it because you're like, oh yeah, it's a small town or a small village. They have a tradition. It doesn't seem sinister. It doesn't seem ominous in any way. But there's still, with Shirley Jackson's writing, there still is that menace because you sort of feel that there's something else, especially with those little comments around the fact that it's got to be drawn. They're waiting for Dunbar. Where is he? Oh, he's broke his legs, or someone's got to draw for him. So you can't get away from it. Like, it's not like you can't
his
say,
wife has drawn. They're like, oh, well, shouldn't your son? But he's only 16. So like, well, that's okay. So you're thinking, oh, well, the kids, because it goes back to what you're saying. It's like, oh, well, the kids, they have rocks. They just want to be involved. So you're thinking the kids aren't involved. So she totally sets you up for that with 2 throwaway lines. And this is how she's the queen of economical writing, only to pull that rug right from out from under you later. Oh.
And also, there's a great moment. It comes later on when they talk about, when you said about being a patriarchal society, when the daughter's married into another family. Oh no, she draws with the other family, and so there's these set rules every year, and so it's really well done. But also that sense of tradition. You get the old man, as you said, the sort of this is 75th.
Mr. Watson, is that his name?
Yeah,
something
that's
like
Mr. Watson.
Yeah.
And and it's been overseen by Mr. Summers, who's sort of the whoever he is in the village. The box lives in the post office for the rest of the year, and no one really thinks about it. Gets kicked about and stuff. But this old guy is sort of the North Village. Well, don't name the village. The North Village have stopped doing it. They don't do the lottery anymore, and he's indignant about it. He's these youngers, they'll keep soon enough that we'll be back living in caves.
If we don't do the lottery, we're going to be cave dwellers again.
Yeah, it feels like by dropping he feels that by stopping the lottery is regressive. It's so it's a tradition, but it's still got this little ominous tone of like, what the hell is it? This thing that they're doing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is so amazing. And so the thing that I love, and again, so you think lottery, and so here's where she's so brilliant. So then you find out it's the Hutchinson family that wins.
Yes. And
so you think there should be like, hooray for Hutchinsons. But there's this sense of relief. And so you're like, wait, don't you want, and that's the first time you realize that winning isn't what you want to do, because it's not like everybody's like, oh, Hutchinsons. They're like, woo, Hutchinsons. And you're like, well, so it's one of two things. You're like, well, is it, you really love them. You're really happy for them, but you're not happy for them. You're happy that it is them.
Yes.
And that's the moment when you realize, oh, because Mrs. Hutchinson this whole time is like all in on it. And then when they win, she's like, well, I don't think it was fair. I don't think we did it right. I don't think it. She starts getting all panicky and,
I love her response. Her response when she starts, well, you didn't give him time to choose properly. You saw that. And people are telling her to shut up.
Yeah.
And even the husband's like, look, shut up. It was fair. We chose. You knew this was a chance.
And especially since they go in alphabetical order. Mm-hmm. So they're H, so whoever's last is always screwed. Never gets a fair chance. And like that's real clear that it's in alphabetical order. And you're H, so you're early on. And he had right. So he's like, what are you talking about? We're not last. Like how do we have a better chance than other people? Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I've just found it. So it's funny because so she says, where is it? So she starts shouting off about, you didn't give him time enough to take any paper he wanted. I saw you. It wasn't fair. And then people come in and go, be a good sport, Tessie, said Mrs. Delacroix. And Mrs. Graves said, all of us took the same chance. And then her husband, Bill Hutchinson, turns around and says, shut up, Tessie. And that's it.
Yeah.
And
Brutal.
and it is. It's just he knows, And so at this point, you're like, what the hell is it that's going to happen? And so it goes on because she moans for quite a bit.
She does. She is, and that's the thing. In this moment, Jackson convinces you to dislike her, which is crazy. Because up to this point, everybody's like, "Oh, we can't start without Tessie and Mrs. Hutchinson this and oh Tessie," and we get this whole thing, and everything seems fine. And then in these, what's like a page and a half, she gets you to totally dislike Tessie. Like as a reader, she tricks you into disliking her, and you're like, all these people are being mean to her, but you're on their side somehow. Like I don't get what she does, but you're like, get Tessie. This is just what we do. Get over it. Why are you being this way? So good.
Because it's an awful situation. It's a weird situation because she becomes a Karen.
She does.
But when you learn what it is she's getting, I mean, the thing is, I feel both sorry for her and I don't, because if it was somebody, when we get to the twist, for those that haven't read the story, when you get to that point, she would have happily done this to anybody else.
Absolutely. She was prepared to do it to anybody else. And the setup is that the old man has done it 75 times. And he's never won. Yeah. So the odds are she thinks, in her favor. And they are.
Technically, with 300 people in the village. Because the thing as well, the way it works is it's not individuals. You pick per family, and then a family wins, and then that family picks again to identify
the ultimate winner. Yes.
To find. And what that's terrifying about that is, even the children pick.
Right. This is she pulls it out from under you. They have a baby, and they're like, somebody pick for the baby. You're like, what? Somebody pick for the baby. How could it be? Because you still don't know what it is yet. So like, how could a baby win the lot? What's a baby going to do with $500 or whatever? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
And so and then she's getting panicky, and then eventually it is Tessie that wins. That she holds her paper in her hand, and her husband Bill actually has to take it off her and present it to Mr. Summers, and it's her. And I'm just going to read this last bit. Where is it? Mrs. Dunbar had small it's good for that. So Mrs. Dunbar had small stones in both hands, and she said, gasping for breath, "I can't run at all. You'll have to go ahead. I'll catch up with you." The children had stones already, and someone gave little Davy Hutchinson a few pebbles. So they'd given it to their own son. Tessie Hutchinson was in the centre of a cleared space by now, and she held her head out desperately as the villagers moved in on her. "It isn't fair," she said. A stone hit her on the side of the head. Old man Warner was saying, come on, everyone." Steve Adams was in front of the crowd of villagers, with Mrs. Graves behind him. "It isn't fair. It isn't right," Mrs. Hutchinson screamed. And then they were upon her.
They were upon her.
Holy crap.
I know. That's how it ends. You're like, what the fuck? They stoned her to death. Her own child throws a rock. So now you have to go, wait a minute. They had a baby draw. If the baby won, they were going to stone a baby to death. Yeah.
The mother was going to have to do, because you have to cut. It feels like, so this is one of those stories where you read to the end and you go, hang on, scroll right back to the top. I've got to read this again.
Yeah. To find the clues.
To see what, and that's where you see the things about the stones and the way that the people are calling on people's sons and all this other stuff. But that last moment, like when they say and then they were upon her, is absolutely horrific. It leaves you in that way. You're terrifying. Like, yeah, because it's to me. I mean, this was 1948, so it was written before. But this is like The Wicker Man.
Sure. Yeah.
This is folk horror. Let's be honest. This is folk horror.
Exactly what it is. Yep.
But it's this thing of sort of like an isolated little village. The communities that we live in, and especially the thing is, reading this in lockdown or reading this during,
right? Yeah.
And you look out your window and you're like, no, pull the blinds in.
Oh my God, that's so true. Yeah, and the thing about it is there. We know when you read it the second time and the 50th time, like I've read it so many times, and every time I'm terrified. I get heart palpitations, even though I know it's going to come, because they tell you.
Yeah.
As soon as this is over, they're going to go have lunch.
Yeah.
They need to be done by noon so everybody can be home they call it noontime dinner, they call it instead of lunch. But it's just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, well, we just stoned our mom to death. Who's going to make lunch? And that's the question. Who's in charge now of the Hutchinson family? Yeah,
well, this is one of the things I find most interesting is when they say that when it was a bigger population or a bigger thing, they do this over 2 days. Can you imagine being in the first one? You're like, what? We got to wait till tomorrow to do this. But yeah, and I can imagine that this is obviously it would have been part of a festival at some point. So there would have been more to. But again, you see about her writing being economical. Like, this village has made this economical because they make it clear, like you say, not only are they going to go back to lunch, they're going back to work in the afternoon.
Yeah, the day just goes on. This isn't body laying there. Yeah,
this isn't a bank holiday. It's not a festival. It's like, all right, well, the lottery has to be done on the 27th. We'll do it in the morning, and then we'll carry on in the afternoon.
Yeah, right. So it's a weekday. This is like June 20. It's like again, we were going to record on a Thursday last week. It's like Thursday. It's just Thursday.
Yeah.
We get the morning off. But even Tessie was like, well, I had to do the dishes before I could come. Like, we had shit to do, man. Stuff's going on. Yeah, we got to.
She was late because she was doing doing her household chores, and that's what sort of that's what sort of sets you off kilter. And then you're like, oh no, this village is horrific. Like this, I mean, I bet real estate in this village cannot be it's not expensive because
who wants to move there?
Yeah, well, this was the interesting thing because again, like you said, there's no date given to this, as in no year, so there's no time period given to this. However, it clearly, and actually, I want your opinion on this. So they acknowledge that the North Village has stopped doing it because they've listened to the younger people. Like, younger people have come up and gone, like, "Are you crazy? Like, this is not good." But do these other villages in the area know that this village is still doing this? Are they Are they still like, well, those in the South Village are still doing this? And they seem to be like, they're not reporting it to any authorities or anything like that. It's not a part of that. It's so local.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think so. I think it is. I think they know, and I think it's right. That's why because it used to be it was when the village was so big, it took 2 days just to draw the names, or maybe it took all day to draw the one name, the family names, and then you had to come back and the family would line up on the next day or whatever, and so you don't know. But yeah, so no, I definitely think they're aware, and there's a reason there's 300 people, and they still make the argument, well, we're such a big village. Well, 300 people really is a big village, but it used to be clearly bigger. And again, she doesn't dumb it down for you. She doesn't say, remember earlier when I said it took 2 days, the village isn't very big anymore. She just tells you it's there. You have to see it. And so, no, 100%, the other villages know what's going on. In my world, this is still happening. That's what, like this in whatever year this is. So if we're pretending it really is 1948, in 2021, wherever this is, it's still happening because traditions still happen and we don't know why. Like you mentioned it, like the weird chicken broil thing or the weird whatever roll the wheel of cheese. Why do we do it?
Yeah.
That's not harming anybody. I mean, sure, you're eating cheese that you rolled on the ground, or you're eating baked chicken, fried chicken, and you're clogging your arteries. That's the worst you're doing. But we don't really know why we do anything. When we think about any holiday, any tradition, mostly we do it because it's a day off.
Yeah.
We don't really think about what it means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in my country, Veterans Day is a day, it was originally Armistice Day, it's November 11th, so it used to be have a different connotation. We've made it for all veterans. But people don't even know that. People don't get we're just like, oh, we just picked a random day for veterans. And it's like, well, it wasn't that long ago. Yeah. That November 11th it had a different meaning. But then we're like, well, we couldn't stop wars. Like World War II was not the war to end all wars, so we cannot call it that anymore. We have to just be all veterans. And so, like my kids, if I didn't tell them that, they wouldn't know. Because most people are just like, oh, it's Veterans Day. It's the day we honor veterans. There's no mail, and there's probably a sale on mattresses somewhere. Yeah. And that's what we do. And so that's why I firmly believe the lottery is still happening, is because no one questions why they're doing it. And that's the argument she's saying is like, she wrote this right after World War II. Mm-hmm. She's asking us to consider the bullshit argument of I was just following orders. That's That's 100%
Thank
what
you.
this
That's
is.
exactly where I was going to go. Yes, this is totally that. It's sort of buying into it. Because the thing is about this as well, it was sort of, I thought about it from a sort of, from that point of view, and it's that thing of seeing your neighbours being trounced away. You know, well, yes, the Goldsteins, well, they've been wonderful neighbours for the last 15 years, but
They are Jewish.
But they are Jewish, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you want to go, hang on, wait a minute. But then, but then that may have been, I don't know, someone of Slavic blood who's gone, yeah, well, they were Jewish. And then 2 weeks later, the SS turn up for them. And they're going, hang on, no. What, why us?
Yeah.
Well, you're of Slav descent, so you're impure as well. It's about obviously compliance and that sort of thing. Because it's weird, because the one thing you say that about traditions, something sparked in my head when I read this, because I was thinking about this idea of holidays. And it was Black Friday. Because Black Friday is pretty much like an American deal, because it's akin. It's
Thanksgiving.
It's linked to Thanksgiving. But we have Black Friday in Britain.
Why?
No idea.
I did not know that. I honestly had no idea. That is new information for me. That makes no sense.
Exactly.
So we have
Black Friday. But the reason we have Black Friday in this country is because of Amazon.
Oh, sure.
Because they've gone, well, we've seen a massive upspike in sales in America on Black Friday, so let's go and take it everywhere else. So everyone else has joined in. So at the end of November, you sort of go, yeah, there's this weird massive sale just before the sort of run up to Christmas, and then you go do Christmas shopping. And that's the thing, like, how do these traditions come about? Like, they're clearly linked to other things, and as you say, this one's been whittled down to become incredibly efficient.
Yeah, 2 hours. There's no her writing. She's just the queen, right? Old Man Warner's 75, and the box existed before him, and he's the oldest person in town. So if he's got the longest institutional memory, he doesn't know why they do the lottery. Yeah. But he's the one who's saying those crazy kids up north. Man. Well, but what do you know? You're 75 and you don't remember. This new box, is so old. They're thinking about making a new one. So however many hundreds and hundreds of years, you're not even questioning it. And so it's like, it's the simple question that every child's first question is why. Yeah. And as parents, we do a shit job of answering that honestly. And because it's always ugly, right? It's an ugly why. The truth is, it's like, because Santa's real. Just shut up and don't be an asshole. And so whatever we come up with, because we don't want to deal with reality, but we do that with everything. What's the shortest, easiest answer? It's because we've always done it. That's the answer.
It's always that way. We've always done this. Change is hard. I mean, change is always difficult in those situations. I mean, you just said that, but the question of why. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this, Daddy? And I remember being a kid and asking those questions, and what you get is a smack around the back of the head. Shut up! Don't ruin it for everybody else.
Right. What? Don't be smart. But you got in trouble for being smart, right? Don't be a smart ass. You're like, wait, shouldn't I be smart? Isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, you were telling me to be smart in school. Make up your mind. Yeah. But that's the thing. Like I say, these traditions. But the other thing as well is the mixing of traditions. Now, again, there's nothing in this book, nothing in this story to give any indication other than it's clearly, like you said, this takes place in Middle America, like without a doubt. And so it is quite, it's set in, it's written in 1948, obviously in America. It would be reasonable to assume that everybody else in this village also goes to church on a Sunday.
Yep, 100%.
And so, there's this thing of like, why do you do this? Oh, well, there's this rhyme, lottery in June, good crops in soon. And you're like, okay, so this is for a pagan god. You can see, the connotations are there. And you're like, but you all go to church on a Sunday. It's clear that this is a mix of, again, so logic is out of the window on this one. It's just, in inverted commas, tradition. It's something we do.
And it's funny, that is the only, and she sets it on the 27th instead of the 20th. Because if it were on June 20th, it'd be even more, because that's a solstice.
Yes, of course.
So that's even more of a pagan holiday, and it almost feels like she's not she knows what she's doing. So I think she deliberately moved it just for that. They're like, we can't do it on the 20th. That's Witch Day. We'll just do it a week later.
On the nose. It's
we'll just do it a week later. And it couldn't put it on July 4th because that's too on the, you know, so it's like right in between those two things. These two totally arbitrary things in America. I mean, July 4th, we all know that we pick holidays based on whatever, and, you know, the signing of the Declaration of Independence was actually July 3rd. But we didn't know until July 4th, so that's the day. And so, like, the summer solstice is the 20th, but again, she doesn't. So it's like right in between these things. At least the summer solstice is a thing. It's science. And so you don't want to do a weird pagan-y cult thing on a scientific day, right? Yeah. So it's all, so she's so intentional with everything that she does in the way that she just sucks you in. It's just like, yeah, like you said, well, it's just a thing we do. And you know, you imagine when there's a lottery on a Sunday, when they get up, they go to church. So they're together all day. They get up, they have breakfast, they go to church. And then after church, they come. And so on that day, the lottery is probably later in the day, or they have to skip lunch or something, or maybe after church, they all go home and have lunch. And that's this one time, you know, every 7 years, they get to do it later in the day because we had to, but you know, they're doing it. You can completely see it. Yeah. And it's like, again, but why are you going to church? Well, that's just what we do. But if you ask, sorry, Christians, if you ask most Christians, they've not read the book that they worship. Yeah. And that's really frustrating. And because they don't ask why. So one of our kids, our oldest daughter, went to a Christian school and was dating a Christian guy. And, you know, I went to a Christian school too, but I didn't, you know, I was raised Catholic and I left that team a long time ago. But so she was interested. So in high school, she started reading the Bible and like reading it. So my wife gave her a copy and she was reading it, reading. She is not on that team really, because she's read the whole book and she's like, you know, women don't get treated super great in here. You know, like intellectualism is kind of frowned on in here. So like she isn't, I wouldn't say she's an atheist or anything, but she's read the whole book, and she would have arguments with people like who are super Christian-y, and they're like, well, what about this? And she's like, yeah, but it says that, like, here are the words. She's very literal. So she's like, here's what it says. And they're like, does it? She's like, yes, read the book that you claim to be. So it's always fascinating to me that the most pious, the loudest of most obnoxious people, like the former president of my country, had clearly never read the Constitution. He'd never read the Bible. He doesn't know anything, but he's saying, oh, I know it, you know. So it's always the loudest, noisiest person doesn't really know why. And that's again, so if you don't want to ask why, don't be a smart ass. So there's this push on just because. And just totally. Becausism. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I love that. The becausism of it all. Yeah. And that's it, because I mean, you know, you've said that this book, this story. You keep calling it a book, and you know why? It's because it feels in these short pages, she's given you this. We're having this conversation so much that the whole world is there, so you feel like you can imagine what next year's lottery is and what the lottery from 20 years ago were. So that's why it's easy to keep thinking it's a book, even though it's a short story, because she's filled in an entire world. Oh yeah, it's a true window into this world. And that's why she's so good. But within the story, it's like you say, it's this thing of, like, it covers so much stuff, because it's about that sort of being an accomplice by complacency, or by letting things happen, sort of thing. But also, like, you're right, it's about asking why. This is that thing of saying, stop a minute. And I don't know Shirley Jackson's religious sort of position or anything like that. Don't know. But this book is clearly about this story is clearly going, no, stop. Ask why, and look at what it is you're doing. In the grander scheme of things, is it really what you think you should be doing? And it's just so impactful. And it's a weird tale, because this to me feels like a weird tale. It's a folk horror tale. This is the same as this is more subtle and probably more impactful than The Wicker Man. Sure. And I love that film. Absolutely. Yeah, the first one we're only acknowledging the first one. Yeah, not the Nick Cage one. No. Was there a Nick Cage one? What? Yeah. We're gonna pretend. I mean, I saw it. You saw it. Everybody saw it, and you're like, "What?" Yeah. How'd you screw that one up? Maybe you shouldn't have remade it. Yeah. But yeah, it's just the fact that it's so
and I'm going to read more. I want to read more of her short stories, because I've read The Haunting of Hill House, and and again, she does it in that as well. There's that economical writing where you get to love the characters, and then she pulls the rug out from you again and again, and she's so good at it. And it's so So what I would say is, I read this in a compilation of stories, an anthology of stories when I was at school. I didn't even know it was Shirley Jackson until very recently, though I've heard about this story and stuff. And she is such an underrated artist, or writer of the 20th century. I think she probably, I don't know, is she more recognized now? I know more of her, but
that's a tough. I think because there's a Haunting of Hill House show or movie that came out recently, which I didn't see. Was that good?
It was good. Yeah, the first one's good. It's not akin. It's nothing to do with the book. It has a very, it's a very, very thin narrative. But The Haunting, obviously, the original movie was great. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't either. And then not that long ago, Crispin Glover's in it, and I can't remember who the lead is. But Crispin Glover's fucking always great. Anything he's in, you're like, crank that up to 12, and he leans hard. And there's a recent film, We Always Lived in the Castle. That's really great. And actually, there's a really great. Have you ever read? We talked about Jeff Lemire a little off air. Have you read Black Hammer?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's great. But there's a lot of We've Always Lived in the Castle going on in Black Hammer. This kind of weird So I think because a couple of her movies have been made. She's in the public domain now. Things are getting public domainy, so that is good. Unfortunately, for her family's cash. But that helps because when you can give stuff away for free, I think, and this is one of the other great she's turn of the 20th century, Kate Chopin, who was very popular in her day. And this was published in the New Yorker, so she was very popular in her day. But there's something about them being women that unfortunately holds them back. The other thing that we talked about today, that Twilight Zone episode where was based on a short story by a woman, and so there's a lot of female writers who just because of misogyny don't get the love. I think that's what it is. I'm hopeful that with her becoming public domain and the movies are being made and that always helps is people will make, once something's free, they're like, I'm going to make 40 versions of this because I'm not going to pay for it anymore. So, but that's a good thing for somebody like her who deserves her time in the sun. Yeah. Yes. When you think about, to me, the greatest writer in English is Jane Austen, it wasn't until she was long dead and her work was in the public domain and people could start making movies. Truly. She's always sold well, but once you could start this would be a good adaptation. And, in the 1900s, the mid 20th century is when Jane Austen, unfortunately, reached the height of her popularity. She published anonymously. The Bronte sisters published under different names. George Eliot just kept her man's name, even when everybody figured out who she was. So there's all these female writers who were either had to publish anonymously or just were. And Mark Twain, who's a great writer in his own right, he hated a lot of female writers, and he was kind of a misogynist prick himself. And so I think that doesn't help. When the dude's like, "Oh, the girls are doing it better," well, I have the power to hold them back. Kate Chopin was actually out of print for years, and somebody found something of hers in the maybe the 50s or 60s, and we're like, "What the fuck is this? This is amazing!" And so then started republishing her stuff. So the hope is that. Sorry, I didn't mean to get on that feminist diatribe, but it's so frustrating because she's so good.
It's true because, and I mean, Shirley Jackson. I was able to find that online and say, follow the link, and the books can be found on Amazon quite, relatively easy. But there's others. I mean, I got turned on to Octavia Butler.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, and someone was like, "Oh, you need to read a couple of those." I was like, "Oh, cool. Can I find a copy anywhere?" I've got them through Kindle now, but
most libraries have them. There's a few digital libraries that are finally starting to publish them, but for a long time now.
Yeah, and it's baffling because again, really good, excellent.
Yeah, Ursula Le Guin.
Yeah,
I mean, she was a bestseller and she was a working author, but again, why isn't she? I mean, she's up there with Clarke and Asimov, right? As the great science fiction fantasy thinkers of all time. And she was a philosopher too. You know, like you read Ursula K. Le Guin and you're in for it, man. You're not going to walk away with that the same person when you started. But same thing. It's like, because she's a woman.
Yeah.
It's painful to say, but it's true.
Yeah, and so we are going to be, I don't want to sound like a patronizing, white male prick, but like, I want to be an ally. I want to be like, yeah, no, go find these women, because some of these writers are incredible. And Shirley Jackson, like, I'm a massive fan of Shirley Jackson, and so I'm so glad to be doing this and discussing this story. So, as an opener for going off and finding this short story fiction for for 20th Century Geek, this is a good one. This has been a good opener. So I appreciate that. So
thank you. I love her. I love, again, short fiction is so good. Like American, again, it's what we did. We've got, we had Poe, we've got Jack London. That's one of those few things that I'm like proud to be American when it comes to our short fiction writers. It's probably because we have short attention spans and we're like, Shakespeare's hard. Can you just tell me a story?
No, I'll tell you what, all right? You can joke that, but what I will say is, writing a short story isn't easy.
No.
Writing a really good, well-structured, it's not like going, I want to write a story, and so I'm just not going to write these bits, and then you write a shorter one. You've got to build tension in a different way. You've got to pace it differently. There's a sort of like the 3-act structure slightly different and all this other stuff. Like the American approach to the short story is I could rattle off tens of writers that I love that write and going back, like not just modern 20th century. You mentioned Poe, but then obviously I'm a massive Lovecraft fan,
right?
But then you get like Clark Ashton Smith and
early Nathaniel Hawthorne. Everybody, I love Scarlet Letter. Don't get me wrong, that book is practically perfect, and I know people shit on it but I love that book. His short stories, Young Goodman Brown. If you want to be terrified, Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown. You're like, talk about a ghost story, like a folk horror story. That thing, another twist that you just never. And that was 1600s. He was just like, so yeah, we've got a good tradition.
You have, I would definitely say that of all the things, yes, I will happily take the mickey out of you because you should. You elected Trump as president. We can't talk though. Let's not we won't go into politics.
Anyway, yes. So
this
thank you for offering this to me. Yeah, and it's like when you said it, there was the only choice. I was like, well, I know what you're thinking of. You're not looking for a love story or whatever. You're like, what is creepy, macabre, a little bit. I mean, because that's the thing. The thing that makes this awesome is it feels like, well, this is fantasy, this is science fiction, but is it? And the best science fiction and fantasy and horror, and this is clearly horror, makes you feel like it's real. Like the reason the Saw movies were good is because they felt way more real than the Friday the 13th. When you're like, Jason can't be real, but Saw, well, damn, that first one in particular, you're like, holy shit. So I think that's what this is Shirley Jackson gives you something that you're like, well, maybe it's fantastical or maybe people just are evil. And so to me, it was a no-brainer. This is by far, hands down, my favorite short story of all time. I just think she is a genius. And so please, everybody, I'm with Scott. Go find some Shirley Jackson.
Seriously, go check it out. Because you're right. Just a good point. There's not a single fantastical element in this story.
At all.
It's so real. It's so grounded. It's terrifying. Right, but Tony, thank you so much, as I said, for doing this. Thank you for coming on and for doing this. But where can people find you and where can they hear you?
Sure. Well, I'm on the Comics in Motion Network, the sister cousin podcast to 20th Century Geek and Victoria Stories Out of Time and Space. We're all friends. There. And so I'm over there. I've got Indie Comic Spotlight, and then I'm doing Season's Greetings with Jack, where we're doing Buffy right now. Up next is Angel. We're gonna cleanse our palette and do Spaced. We're gonna just do the whole series of Space. So it'll be like series greetings with Space, and then we'll see where we go from there. So that's gonna be really exciting. We do like a modern day analysis of these classic shows. So that's fun. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Tricycle Boombox, and or you can go to my website AR Farina. And I don't know if you know this, listeners, but our glorious host has edited a book and he let me be in it. So please go to Sequart and buy the Judging Dredd book with cover by Sam Lutfi, which is amazing.
It is, yeah, and that is like bleeding edge news. That's now done. Like
So exciting.
everyone's signed up. It's been finished. It has gone to the print. We've literally just been talking to Julian for the podcast. It's going off to the printers. Like that book is going to be real.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so honored to be part of it.
So hopefully, when this goes out, there will be a short advert, maybe. So you may actually get to hear Tony's voice twice on this thing.
Wow.
So it's Judging Dredd, examining the world of Judge Dredd. Some amazing contributors: myself, Tony, Julian, and a whole bunch all over the world. One of the things I would say, just as a bit of things, is the diversity of people that we've had, contributing to that book. There's people from the States. I've got some people from Britain. I've got some people from Europe. I've got a guy from Poland. I've got a guy from Pakistan. It's awesome. So it's a really good book. I'm really proud of it, and everyone that did something for it. So yeah, go get it. And we're also, hopefully, fingers crossed, we may get getting some attention from 2000 AD. So yeah, we shall see. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. I always appreciate all my listeners. If you like what we're doing, go to your podcast catcher, leave us a review, 5 stars, 1 star. I don't really care, preferably 5 stars, but just give us some feedback, give us a review. Let's get up the chart so everybody else can talk about the lottery as well. If you really like what we're doing, go check us out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/20CG Media, 20CG Media. That covers all the 20th Century Geek media podcasts, including 20th Century Geek and Stories Out of Time and Space. We've got 3 tiers on there, and you get a whole bunch of stuff. We've been going for exactly a year now, and so you've got a year's worth of podcasts of 30-minute thoughts, me giving my thoughts on different things. Monthly, well, that one's monthly. Then quarterly, we've got quarterly creator review. And now we're starting to do the Twilight podcast as well, which is me and Julian. And Tony, you've just joined us for an episode as well. So, tens of episodes on there as well. If you like what we're doing, more on there. It's reasonable price, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
And you definitely help keep the lights on in 20th Century Towers. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening, and we shall talk again soon.
Sequart presents Judging Dredd. 13 essays analyzing 2000 AD's most beloved and reviled character. Forward by Matt Smith. Interview with Rob Williams. Edited by Scott Weatherly. Find out who is the law.
Book available to purchase from Sequart, Amazon.com.uk, and all other great book sellers.